Hello, and thank you for joining us for our latest Finovate webinar, Key Themes and Changes in Wealth Management, Client Experience, and the Impact of Generative AI. I'm David Penn, Research Analyst with Finovate. Leading our discussion today are David Porter, Managing Director of Genesys, and Chris McDonald, who's Leader Wealth Management Sector with AWS. To start off, I thought maybe we could have each of you tell us just a little bit about yourselves, your roles at your respective organizations, and just what is it that brings AWS and Genesys together?
Thank you, David. This is David. So I'm grabbing the microphone first, if that's okay. David Porter, I lead our global financial services vertical here at Genesys. I've been at the company for 2.5 years, based in New York. So that's the kind of brief potted bio. Wealth management is of incredible interest to us. We have broad, deep relationships with most providers all around the world. In terms of the relationship with AWS, I think technically would be called Industry Alliance Partners. What it actually means is that our Genesys cloud capabilities are built on and in AWS cloud. So technically, we're kind of like joined at the hip from a foundational level. In terms of a kind of why are we kind of talking and appearing together? Well, so much of what we do is, I think, impactful, particularly in this wealth space. Like, in terms of how you communicate with advisors, in terms of how clients communicate with the brokerage houses and banks, whether it's a traditional phone call, email, in-app messaging, social media, etc. Genesys brings together and orchestrates all of that client communication technology. AWS, in terms of kind of future-looking and current AI large language model kind of, I hate to steal any thunder, but kind of bedrock foundational principles is kind of key in that space. So we have kind of a nice overlap and a nice kind of foundational kind of alignment that I think makes a lot of sense for us to be here together.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, David P. Well, that doesn't work, actually, David Porter and David Penn. We've got two Englishmen here as well talking to you today. Yes, as David said, I sit within the AWS Capital Markets Market Development team. Work very closely with our customers around what we're seeing in the industry around cloud adoption, industry trends, and then not only with our customers, then obviously with our partners, as well as like David here on the Genesys side. Obviously, conversations that we'll have with customers often go down the path of how do they build, how do they leverage the different services, the different capabilities within AWS, but then it's also how do we work with the partners that are also, our partners on AWS.
Excellent, excellent. So let's go ahead and start with sort of a scene setting. We've got so much to cover and not as much time as we'd like to have to spend on everything we have to talk about. So let's just jump right into it. And maybe, David, we'll start with you. What would you say, how would you characterize the state of the wealth management industry today in 2023?
Oh, sure. Awesome question, David. And it's great to have that scene setting. So if we start with the basics, I would say the industry is in great shape. So wealth and planning are the key growth engines for both smaller brokerage companies and, of course, the giants in the industry, the Morgan Stanleys, the UBSs, the Credit Suisses. Well, I shouldn't say Credit Suisse, that's no UBS, Schwab, etc. And there are really good reasons for that. So firstly, wealth products are so much better than they were even 5 years ago. They're easy to use, they're easy to access, the fee structures are just much more transparent. And then secondly, there's incredible capability. So in our webinar today, if you get slightly distracted, you could, if you so chose, open up your retirement account on the app on your phone and rebalance your portfolio. I don't think you should, but you could. And you couldn't do that 5 years ago, right? So there's been transformational capability change in this space. Then thirdly, there's much more democratic access to funds, to products, to ideas and insights, again, than there was 4 or 5 years ago. So wealth management is no longer just for older retired people. And if you talk to Gen Zs, they're in this space, they grew up with Bitcoin, they grew up with risk and assessments and returns, and they're looking for that. So it's a fabulous time for this industry.
Yeah, and I'll just pile in there on top of it. It's a super exciting time, and it has been, right, for several years and continues to be. And I think a lot of those kind of aspects and points there that David talks to, it's the changing landscape that we're seeing that has been brought around by the changing technologies available. A lot of the kind of cloud technologies that we've seen, right, the increase in data, whether that's external data or internal data. I mean, the stats are out, the amount of data that's created every day, but with the ability with compute and with the data infrastructures available within the cloud, being able to pull that data in and run those kind of analytics has really opened up what customers, and as David spoke to, the Gen Z kind of generations that are coming in, and then also the mass affluent that have been coming into the space, right? I mean, it's not a new topic, but we've been talking about it for a while, this kind of growth in the mass affluent sector. And then we had the catalyst of COVID really kind of pushing the digital channels, right? That hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away. People are going back to branches a little bit, but really they want to be able to do their stuff on their phone, on their laptop, on their desktop, you know, and then it's not only exciting in that kind of direct to consumer and the mass affluent, it's all the way across. So even when we get to the high net worth kind of model and into the ultra high net worth, etc., for those advisors, sure, you know, they have to provide that more white glove, high touch kind of response, and that's what the high net worth individual wants. But they want those same tools. They want that ability, right? They need that customer 360. They need that personalization. So, you know, it is exciting times. I echo David's sentiments.
Now, here's one question that I have. With all of this that's going on, all of this change happening in such a short period of time, where within all of that change are some of the real key opportunities that folks like yourselves and organizations you work for are able to take advantage of? And David or Chris, whoever wants to take that one to start.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think the key here, right, I was just starting to kind of touch on it a bit. So it's kind of being more client friendly. And again, it goes across the kind of the whole gamut of what we have there, right? So if we think about our traditional models in the advisor-led space for the high net worth individuals, and the self-service, the direct to consumer, and then dare I say it, you know, hybrid advice. I think we'll touch on that a bit more, maybe because no one really wants to talk about robo-advising, and that is kind of moving into this kind of concept, this idea of hybrid advice. But these opportunities for all the firms that are working in the space is, how do I grow my AUM, right? And so then with that kind of assets under management, like trying to grow that, how we do it in the mass affluent space, it's improving that self-serve model. It's being able to take advantage, like we're saying, of that data, of those analytics. And what do we want? We want to have, or what do customers want? I say, right, you want increased insights, right? You want nudges, you want recommendations. How do you get that? It's a lot of that customer 360. So when you're kind of logging into your portal and you're doing that work, it's like what you're seeing is relevant to you. It is personalized to you based on these data sets. You might want increased education, you know, around the financial markets. And like I said, moving into like, how does that progress from that robo advice into kind of a hybrid advice model? If we look at it from the more traditional and the high net worth space on the advisor-led space, what are the options there? They need to spend more time with their customers on that high touch, in that white glove space, right? Talking to them about markets, talking to them about prospects, talking to them about what they want to be able to do, what their goals are, where they can work, and how do they do that? But you need to kind of relieve some of that administrative burden that we often talk about, right? If you can read multiple articles out there and you can see how much time is spent, let's just say, on onboarding and how painful it can. How much time do I spend kind of shuffling paper? You know, I need to spend time on having the more involved, complex conversations. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We'll hear, you know, a lot of customers, firms talking about needing that single pane of glass. So having that holistic view of everything that you need an advisor right in front of them, so you can have those value conversations with the customer driver. And that single pane of glass as well is not only just building those tools yourself, there's a whole kind of universe of working with partners and pulling it in and being able to join together, that kind of plug and play model. You know, David, you had anything to add to on that?
Yeah, I think that kind of focus on experience is super important. And traditionally, the industry has thought of experience as being something that gets delivered by the advisor, because the advisor likes that model, because that's how they get paid. And then everyone that doesn't qualify for or thinks they don't need an advisor, well, will call them self-serve and just leave them alone. But there's a fallacy fundamentally, I think, in that thinking. It just doesn't really work anymore. And, you know, I use an example. Let's just tell this little story. So imagine, as a financial advisor, you have Beyonce as your client, and Beyonce wakes up this morning, it's a nice Friday, or it's a Saturday, whatever it is, and she thinks to herself, you know what, I just had this thought. Apple computers, that's the stock to buy. So what does Beyonce do? Well, you know, she pulls out her phone, she transfers over, well, she needs enough money not to buy 10,000 shares in Apple because it's Beyonce, she'll buy 100,000. Right, so she's going to transfer over to her trading account the funds to actually buy the 100,000 shares in Apple. She'll actually kind of place the buy order right then and there. Then she'll text her advisor and tell her what she just did. The advisor receives the text and she thinks, oh, geez, so that's interesting. So she emails back to Beyonce and says, hey, you know, we should talk about this and any other ideas that you have. And then she emails to Beyonce a video chat, you know, calendar appointment for the next day. So the next day they actually connect via video, just as we're talking right now. And then the advisor hears about Beyonce's ideas for both Apple Computer and Latin America fixed income, right? And then they finish that conversation, then off they go to do their various kind of things in life. Now, all of those experiences, those devices, those patterns, those channels are much better if they're all coordinated. I hate to use the word orchestration, but kind of orchestrated together and kind of recorded so they meet kind of SEC and FINRA requirements. And that's all good, but was that a hybrid? Was that a self-serve? Was that kind of an advisor-led kind of interaction? Well, it was kind of all three, right? And I think that's where people are at. And I used Beyonce as an extreme example, just so, you know, it gave her some memorable qualities. But that's where I think the kind of that hybrid type approach, I don't know whether it even needs definition, but that is the winning strategy now. You have to kind of be able to offer all things to all of your clients across all spectrums to be able to effectively serve their needs and give them the experiences that they want.
Absolutely. That's really, really interesting the way you put it. And I definitely understand the illustrative nature of the Beyonce example. Chris, there was a thought that you had to share.
Yeah, well, I have a Taylor Swift example. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, I think just to elaborate on the hybrid advice, right? It's like, I think we have a slide up here at the moment, right? So it has the industry ever defined what hybrid advice is? You know, David just kind of put it out there, but it's like conversation we have, it's like kind of defining what that hybrid advice is. And I think it's going to vary across different customers, different business models, what it is. So some people are comfortable, you know, self-directed, doing what they need to do. Other people are aware that they want to speak to an advisor, understand, you know, maybe about other products are out there, but maybe that advice is different. Maybe it's in financial planning. They might want to know what are their peers doing in this space, or it might be they just need some education, right? And that education could be in various areas. It could be on products, it could be on the market, it could be on advice on how do you save. And that's going to depend as well on the individual that you're talking to and where they are in their kind of journey, or are they trying to grow assets? Are they trying to just, you know, retain their assets? Are they looking for new yields? Are they looking? So I think it's going to very much vary, and each model is going to see that kind of defined. But, you know, on the horizon, and I'm amazed that we haven't really spoken or has come up too much, but, you know, the tools that are being made available with generative AI and the kind of stress, it really kind of helps kind of push the envelope on that and kind of move that conversation. So I think, you know, that's another exciting space kind of on the hybrid advice to kind of get into.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if maybe we could sort of go down that road just a little bit in terms of, we talked again about the hybrid advice and the role of experience, as David pointed out, but in terms of some of the other key trends in wealth management, things like financial education. And again, you just mentioned generative AI, which is huge across financial services. I have to imagine there's an impact in wealth management as well.
Yeah, there's, you know, a lot of use cases in this space, right? Just across financial services altogether, but in the wealth management space, you know, it's key. There's a lot of use cases, a lot being talked about, and you know, let's touch on financial education. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about space. I've read a lot in that space. I've been to events where it's come up, and a lot of people have been talking about it. When we talk to financial education, right, it's that ability. Maybe it's providing investment research. Maybe it's being able to get the right document in the hands of a customer that you're having a conversation with. Maybe it's just information on different products that are available. Maybe it's information on kind of goals that you should have if you're saving, where you should get to based on your risk profile or your own personal requirements or what you're looking to achieve, or on your goals, or segmenting with your peers. I think there's a lot that can be done on the financial education front. I think, you know, there is a general phobia amongst people that they don't know enough and they want to know more. And then there's also people don't know what they don't know. I mean, I just think of myself sometimes, you know, I'm like, oh, well, that's great. I didn't know that. That's awesome. I know that. And if you can kind of be able to provide that financial education with, again, Customer 360 is used a lot of them, but with that, being able to personalize it to an individual and, you know, make it relevant to where they are and what they're doing, I think there's a huge kind of opportunity there.
David, you have any thoughts on this particular angle of what's going on with generative in wealth management?
Sure. I mean, look, I mean, I worked in this industry for years, and Chris mentioned it, and he's right. People do have like a finance phobia, right? So people don't really like to pick up a pen and add a 20% tip to a restaurant bill, because they're kind of looking around thinking, have I got the numbers right? What's 20%? Have I added them up correct? People don't even like doing that, right? Let alone think about constructing a portfolio, let alone compare the returns of fixed income versus equities and then risk assessment, which is why financial advisors exist in the first place, because people choose to outsource all of this kind of mental effort. And without even touching on the role of the advisor, there are processes that the industry still is living with today that will be much better with the advent of kind of large language models and the next generation of AI that Chris just touched upon. So to build out that point, think of a process like putting together a financial plan. Well, what does that process look like today? Well, it kind of, starts with, and I think of like a lady that used to work for me on our team at JP Morgan Chase, and she was a big producer in New Jersey. And she would have a shtick of basically saying, well, with a client, are you taking a summer vacation this year? The client would say, well, yes, we're taking a very nice vacation. We're going to Greece. Oh, lovely. How did you plan for that? Well, it was the holidays. My husband and I, we talked about it. Then in January, we looked at various options. And then in February, we talked to people. And in March, we finally did the booking and we're going to Greece. Oh, awesome. So it took about 3 months to plan your vacation. Yes. How much time have you put into planning the next 30 years of your financial life? No, none at all, right? So, and that shtick for her was really successful. But what it was also really getting at is that financial planning process is pretty awful today. Like when you realize you need a financial plan, you go off to see the advisor. The advisor sends you home and says, come back with all of your statements. And you come back, a week later with a shopping bag full of statements. The advisor literally gives the statements to their assistant, who manually plugs data into like a financial planning calculator. You come back the following week and you get an 80-page report that tells you should be here, but you're only here, and you need to buy a whole bunch of investment product from the advisor to close the gap. That's kind of the planning process. And it's not good enough. It's not accessible enough. It's not vibrant enough or up to date enough. And the good news is, though, it now can be. And some of the capabilities that are coming through, particularly from companies like AWS, I think will be transformative in this space.
Very interesting. In terms of, we talked about a lot of different areas within wealth management. Are there particular areas within this space that you think are particularly worthy of focus right now? And Chris, we'll go with you.
Yeah, sure. I think David has a slide up here as well, which is right. So kind of some of the traditional AML wealth use case examples we have here, right? So I think probably a lot of people are familiar with these. Some of the work on client onboarding, you can think of their using services like we had, the AWS recognition, which is around kind of using facial recognition. We're also doing work around fraud detection. There's document processing. You can see all these items here. But what is really changing with the generative AI is like these large language models, these foundation models are able to create these better, more human-like conversational responses. So we've had chatbots for a while, but now chatbot can improve, right? So you can have improved responses, more content, it can be up to date, it can take actions. I've seen kind of ideas out there of a chatbot, an internal chatbot that will be like an investment analyst chatbot. So investment analysts asking questions to the chatbot, and that chatbot being able to pull in reams of data, go through market data, and then actually execute code and generate charts and tables, right? And then give that back to the analyst. So freeing up an analyst and not having to do that work, and that kind of ties in as well to call centers, right? Making them much more able to have those conversations and not just be pre-trained on, kind of Q&A that you had. It's now somebody being able to do answers on the fly and being able to update that and pulling in more information. Document search is kind of key, right? And this really helps our financial advisors in essence, being able to put that right document in front of a person. So asking again, it might be to a chatbot, I need a document that covers A, B, and C, right? And you could have trained this model to be able to kind of go into a large set of different repositories that you have and receive back the most relevant document that you have. I touched on it earlier a bit on the education, but being able to aggregate and summarize data is key for creating investment research, educational documents. So if you think you can have generative AI searching, pulling in market data, prospectuses, filings, all sorts of data, and then be able to write a summary in the form of how you want to reply to a certain customer and at the length that you want. I mean, that's hugely powerful and takes, a lot of time away from someone else to do that. I've seen examples of using that in kind of for prospecting, for lead generation, right? Particularly in the high net worth space, right? Pulling together those disparate data sets and then being able to ask questions that will automatically kind of do natural language processing kind of prompts to come back, hey, I'm looking for individuals in Gulf based in California who have X amount of dollars are interested in this, like putting that back and then even creating an agenda meeting notes for you to go and be able to take to them. There's a lot of portfolio construction, portfolio management, you can do pieces there. And then the last one is that we're seeing people talking about not so much advice, but coding companions, right? We've even got tools, we have Amazon Code Whisperer that is generating code, right? To kind of help with some of that low level kind of code that's being done. So there's a lot in there.
Absolutely. David, I'm curious if there are any particular, Chris gave us a plethora of use cases. Are there any particular use cases or workflows with this generative AI that maybe have caught your attention in particular?
So from a Genesys standpoint, I think it's important to kind of back up and say, look, we have AI that's up and running and used in production already across like wealth managers, brokerage houses today. And they just smooth out some of the experiences the clients are having already. So for example, like we have predictive routing that tells a client where a client's first contact should actually be sent first, like whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, like here's where we should send this, like where we should route it. Predictive engagement will tell a bank or a brokerage house why we think a client is actually first calling, right? Which is kind of cool. So you can kind of prepare in near real time in advance of an actual connection. Then Agent Assist is a capability that kind of hums away in the background of a conversation and says, oh, David, now's the time to read a disclosure and you didn't do it. Or, David, awesome, this client conversation is going really well. Now's the time to make a product offer. Right? And it kind of like helps with that kind of like literally kind of assist with the conversation. So that's in production running already. So there are good use cases that are just not conceptual, they're there. To Chris's point, there's so much more to come though, and really transformational stuff.
That's a really good point, and actually really leads me into the next question I had for you, and that's, given all of this that's coming and all of the change and the drama of that change, are people ready for it? Both in terms of on the customer side, are they ready for it? And on the advisor side, we're going to have all of these new tools at their disposal. What are the pitfalls if folks aren't really ready for a lot of stuff that's going to be coming at them this way?
Yeah, I'll jump in, David, on this one just to start with. I think first of all, slide up there, right? So first of all, are they ready? We're helping customers be ready here at AWS, right? We have a great platform available, right? And our strategy is, one of flexibility and, allowing customers to choose the right strategy that they need. So we have Amazon Bedrock, which you're able to then via a single API connect to. You can access AWS foundational model, large language model Titan, but we also have third-party foundational models in there, such as Anthropic. And we have open source language models that are available, and that's constantly changing, evolving as we need to. If customers, and we're hearing this more, want to customize their data, train it, make it more differentiated to your use case that you're doing, we have SageMaker, so you're able either to build from scratch or fine-tune that data. And then we also have our own silicon, right? A lot of this is compute, so we have very efficient silicon that can be used specifically for these purposes. So Inferentia and Trainima chips that we have in that space. And then also from a code generation piece, we have Code Whisperer, which I mentioned to earlier. So that's kind of like how we are helping customers, but like, are advisors ready for this? That's an awesome question. I can't, say I've spoken to everybody, but I'll say from the conversations that I've had and what I'm picking up, and if you, to some extent to read the tea leaves, there's a lot of hype, right? But I think it's very different to when we had all the blockchain kind of hype and people were like, well, I'm not really sure what the use cases. There's a lot of use cases out there. So I think everyone knows there's going to be an impact. What that exact impact is, we don't know. But I don't think it's a case of, replacing the human and everyone's losing the job. It's not. It's about productivity. It's about efficiency. So I think, for being ready, we've seen some customers making announcements, right, of what they're already doing. We've seen customers who put out their POCs that they're doing, and they're also doing internal builds. But I think they're ready for that. Well, they are ready and they're showing it, right? They're experimenting, they're being out in front, and they're working. I think advisors are really key, and the firms in this space are really keen to get involved, because if I'm an advisor and I can suddenly have these massive efficiency gains and productivity gains, that's better for my customer. I used to be able to look after 100 customers. Now I can grow that by 50%. Who doesn't want that, right? That's a great win. So I think as people embrace and understand what can be done, I think, yeah, they are getting ready for it.
And David, yeah, I'll just, so here are like kind of 2 or 3 kind of key thoughts. Like, first of all, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, it first really appeared on the scene 7 or 8 years ago. And most large banks, brokerage companies, etc., went out and they did massive investments, not only in kind of platforms, but also in people. You know, let's go away and hire 200 PhDs in computer science from MIT. And they all went off and did this. And that they probably overinvested, like, and ahead of where the technology and the capabilities and the market readiness actually was, just to be clear. I think today there's a kind of we've finally reached the tipping point, and as Chris has touched upon, there are now new next generation levels of kind of like AI and large language models and ChatGPT type capabilities that are transforming the landscape. Banks and brokerages houses are taking a much more kind of, I think, steady approach though to this kind of evolution. Let's call it evolution, not revolution. And the steady approach means that doing things internally, smaller, real use cases, stay focused, do things that we know will make sense, versus let's try and reinvent the world. So I think that first kind of observation is a reflection of a maturer industry kind of being readier and knowing how to do things in the right way. I think a second observation, though, would be in terms of advisors and clients. The industry itself is a bit obsessed with 2 segments, right? They're obsessed with baby boomers and millennials. And personally, I think it's a bit of a mistake in that the 2 key segments, I think, actually is Gen X and Gen Z. Gen X, because of course, where's all the wealth transfer happening over the next 5 years? To Gen X. Where is the next generation of kind of wealth production and accumulation coming from? Gen Z. So the industry needs to kind of like refocus on those 2 segments. And by the way, those 2 segments, one, the Gen X's are really hard to market to, hard to kind of get hold of, which is why marketers tend to like disappear them from their demographic segmentation studies, right? And then the Gen Zs, these are really savvy people. These are savvy people that grew up with, you know, as we said, like with really good understanding of investments, alternative investments, comparing data, using large data sets. So they're pretty ready. For the advisors, my own thought is that in the ultra high net worth space, the advisor model is probably going to stay pretty unchanged, in that those are really complex needs and you need complex expertise to support in that space. If you're not in that space, an advisor, I think your role is going to change a lot, and you're going to have to be much more kind of open to and aware of the client education, your own capabilities and awareness of AI platforms, vendors, technology, and all of that is going to be part of the actual advice that you give. It's not just about financial product, because the products, as I said earlier, are so much better. You almost don't need to advise on them. It's the kind of infrastructure and the technology and the AI surrounding it that's going to need more advice. So I think those roles will need to evolve.
Very, very interesting. We're coming up near the end of our time, unfortunately, as I knew that we would struggle to get in everything that we wanted to talk about. So I thought maybe by way of wrapping up sort of summaries or key takeaways, or however you'd like to put it, we could maybe, if each of you maybe address that. And also I wanted to touch on just the notion of companies to watch out for, companies that are doing some interesting things. And both of you, Chris and David, mentioned some interesting experimentation that you were seeing. Perhaps by way of wrapping up, we could have each of you maybe talk about that in the context of some of the key takeaways from today's conversation.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Just kind of 3 takeaways as thinking this as having this conversation. I think, first of all, super key, right? Have a good foundation. What do I mean by that, right? You've got to have a data strategy. You've got to have an overall strategy. Utilize the technologies out there, right? So use the cloud technology to get that data strategy right, to have the compute in place, to be able to take advantage of the services that are available in the generative AI and AI ML space. And with that, you've got to make sure that culturally everybody's bought in from a business perspective and from an engineering perspective, and then how we're going to use those tools. So that's one, like have a good foundation. 2, be flexible, right? Be able to pivot, make sure you have the correct service, be ready to change. It's new, right? So you're working with it, embrace it, be flexible, and see where you land. Work with these different use cases. And then lastly, I think what David was just touching on a bit was experiment, test, check, and be iterative in that process as you do it, right? Start with internal kind of models. Keep a human in the loop. Everyone's doing that. That human is there to check the end, to check the content. We're not just going to go and let this go crazy and everyone do anything, right? But so experiment, test with it, see what you get, and start to use that. So that would be my 3 takeaways. Good foundation, be flexible, and experiment.
Awesome points. And all I could do, David, would be to build on Chris's points. So years back, I used to work for American Express, and Amex, great company, and they would insist on you mystery shopping things, whether it's like travel experiences, airlines, hotels. You've got a mystery shop, how good are they? And as an industry, we should be doing a lot more mystery shopping, right? Advisors need to be doing it, banks, brokerage companies. And by mystery shop, I don't mean if you're JP Morgan, mystery shop what Morgan Stanley's doing, what each other are doing. Go elsewhere, right? Look in other markets, other places for both innovations and technologies that are being used. And by elsewhere, I don't mean go to the UK or go to France, that's not useful. Go to Israel, go to Turkey, go to Finland, go to New Zealand. You'll find some crazy things. So keep that mystery shopping going. And also, of course, just staying focused on the client and the client, who they are, what are their wants and needs, and how can technology help improve those wants and needs better than people are actually kind of getting today. I think that's really key. And then in terms of companies that are out there that are doing good things, I think there's no one company, but just watch the space, watch the headlines, see who has really super interesting things that are coming through. It's just such a fast moving area right now. And by fast moving, I don't mean that transformation is going to take 5 years. I think over the next 18 months, 24 months, 36 months is when clients are going to really start to see kind of new, much better experiences flowing through.
Fascinating, very, very interesting, and very timely. Something that we're going to be able to see the effects of in a very, very short period of time. Again, unfortunately, we've run out of time for today's conversation. I want to thank David and Chris for some very, very fascinating insights into the field of wealth management and customer experience, and importantly, what's coming up with AI. You can go ahead and check out the Finovate blog for recordings of this presentation if there's something you want to reflect on or miss or share with a colleague. So again, on behalf of Finovate, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chris, for your insights, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.